Welcome back, everybody. My name's Ben from the Ben and Bev channel, and today we're going to be doing another episode of Films You Should Try. Shoot us a like too if you're so inclined, and without further ado, let's get going. Super is a 2010 superhero satire film directed by James Gunn and starring Rainn Wilson, Elliot Page, and Kevin Bacon. Now, I've noted the film for years, and it's been on my watch list for quite a while as James Gunn is the director, and I've really wanted to see anything he's done before Guardians of the Galaxy. Going into this film, every time I've asked someone about it that's seen it, they always compare it to 2010's other superhero satire rated R comedy. While the comparison's definitely there, with the main characters both being kind of sad sack losers, I think Kick-Ass has a much more mainstream appeal with its action comedy roots. Even the miserable moments in the main character in Kick-Ass's life are still used as comedy and are extremely funny to the audience. In this film, it's actually quite the opposite. The horrible events that happen in Frank, played by Rainn Wilson's life, are not funny at all. In fact, we spend 6 of the first 30 minutes of the movie watching him ugly cry as he narrates about himself crying, which is definitely a unique method for character development for a superhero movie. It's definitely not one I've seen before. But the film's writing sets it up even more as they introduce us to this character. As he narrates how plain and boring his life is, he talks about the few times that he's ever experienced what he considers real happiness. One of those memories just being pointing at a bank robber so the cop knows which way to go, and the other being his marriage to Liv Tyler's character, which happens before the beginning of the film. And of course that one doesn't work out as she ends up leaving him for Kevin Bacon's drug dealer character, though they never directly say what drug he is doing or even selling for that matter. The first time he walks on the screen, you instantly know this guy, he's probably a cokehead.
You know, the kind that talks too much and tries to convince you to do too much even if you don't know them. You're just at the bar with your buddies and you're randomly out of nowhere, this guy asks you for a cigarette and you're just like, no man, I don't smoke, and all of a sudden he's telling you, hey man, if you got
$200, you and your buddies and me, we can get all messed up tonight. You're just like,
and if you think it's all going to be rolling laughs just because of the description of the movie, you're absolutely wrong. This really dark setup and just watching his life go horribly, there isn't a joke to be found. The few jokes there are in the first half are either totally absurd in nature or just chuckles of awe and astoundment at what weird situation you just looked at. And it's even more noticeable because the whole film rolls out with this super lo-fi indie budget appeal, whether it's the 90s theme music, shaky camera angles, cheesy dialogue, or just the overuse of physical effects and gore at points. And you know, it had me thinking while I was watching, I was like,
man, this almost feels like a trauma film, like a slight riff on The Toxic Avenger. Like, James Gunn was definitely a big fan.
And naturally, upon doing further review for the film, I see that Gunn's start was actually over at Trauma Films with Kaufman himself, and this was his first breakout role besides Slither, and ultimately ended up being what helped him get Guardians of the Galaxy. Isn't that a Disney movie, technically?
like, have y'all even seen Terra Firma? Like, James Gunn listed as a writer on that, and I can never look at Gherkin Pickles the same after that movie, and Disney wanted this?
So what's the Crimson Ball's superhero origin story again?
Oh yeah.
that's right.
After losing everything and failing to save his ex-wife and getting his ass beat by Yondu and Kraglin, and yes, I know it's technically not Yondu and Kraglin, but I have decided that this movie is actually just a prequel to Guardians of the Galaxy 1. This is what Yondu and Kraglin were doing before they picked up Quill. Beat to hell, Frank goes home, does what any man would do, and just pops on the TV. After switching through some really weird and questionable things on cable that night, just know there was tentacles. He decides to watch The Holy Avenger, which is Nathan Fillion. It's his only role in the movie. He probably didn't have to interact with any other actors because despite the dream sequence that he has later in Frank's head, he is only in this show that Frank is watching. And I don't know about you guys, but growing up in the Midwest, I always would see these comic books of Bible Man, and that's all I can think of when I see his characters. Like, this is definitely a riff on Bible Man, and James Gunn's also from my area, so maybe.
So yeah, after that, Frank prays.
He prays for a sign to continue with his life path. And Nathan Fillion's Holy Avenger shows up in his dreams and he's touched by the finger of God.
Does he have powers?
Nah, dog.
Super strength?
Nada.
Super speed?
Nope.
Flight?
Nothing.
Just a man with crazy ideas, a homemade suit, and a spray-painted wrench. Actually gets super funny right here at the second act as it shows him try to do these stakeouts every night, and he keeps a log, and basically it's just him doing nothing for the entire night, getting scared by various boxes, which makes it even more hilarious as he's interacting with the various criminals later on in the movie when the crime actually happens. He's just so ridiculous with this wrench. Some superheroes question if they're going too far, but Frank, not really, no. He just goes ahead, hits people with the wrench whenever he wants to. His morals are definitely something. Also, Crimson Bolt has hands down the best catchphrase. Shut up, crime. And as this movie picks up, we also get the introduction of the best character in the film, Elliot Page's Bolty. Originally, I forgot the character's actual name, but Bolty comes off as this withdrawn girl working at the comic book store who's super nerdy and kind of helps out Frank every time he comes in, but really is just trying to figure out if he's really the guy on the news. But as soon as she takes that Bolty manner and end up with this Batman-Robin relationship, even though Frank doesn't want a sidekick, it's hilarious. The character is just so overly violent and gleeful every time they're killing someone, it's ridiculous to watch.
Should I be laughing? Should I be cringing? Should I be concerned?
Utterly amazing and super animated character. Another thing that I thought was pretty funny was that the line butting scene in particular reminded me of this movie called God Bless America from 2011, which is a really, really black comedy starring Joel Murray and Tara Lynn Barr. Joel plays this really disgruntled guy whose name is also Frank, randomly when he's just going out and enacting revenge on people he thinks deserve to be punished. He recruits either a high school or young college girl that Tara Lynn Barr plays named Roxy, and that movie came out just a year afterward. So it's a little bit uneven pacing, if you ask me. The movie definitely feels a little shoddy at the beginning and gets a little better as it goes on, whether it's just the camera angles, filter, just overall tone of the film. It feels a lot better in that last half. A lot more of a complete idea rather than just this cute little niche indie film.
Blockbuster Pulp Fiction type of thing.
Also, the scene where Bolty and Crimson Bolt go to the gun store is probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen. They just have this huge cart full of guns and weapons, and as they're leaving, they give knuckles to the dude at the counter.
Outstanding.
That brings us to our...
Spoiler warning! And this movie is not as twisty as the last one, so these spoilers aren't really going to ruin it for you, but if you haven't seen the movie, I did think that this ending actually had a really good emotional pull. It's far too clever for a film that was as ridiculous as it had been earlier on. So as the movie goes from very uneven and dark to very explosive and funny and violent, we now get to the third act in our crazy big fight on Kevin Bacon's big cokehead compound with Yondu and Kraglin in tow, or maybe not Kraglin, is kind of channeling Lieutenant Dan last time I saw him. Our two heroes start off super sneaky, picking off each security guard one by one until they shoot Bolty. It caught me off guard. The fight scene rolling out, we're really building up. She gets this absolutely crazy kill and is screaming and laughing like a maniac, and she gets her head blown off. Super gory too, like her head's gone. There's just a big old crater missing out of it. And it hit me with a huge impact. I did not expect that at all, especially right then before the final fight scene had even finished. I wasn't expecting her to get killed, and it really hurt.
And we're just not going to talk about the weird sidekick superhero role-playing thing that happened right before that, because that totally ruined the moment.
Right here, this whole movie just snaps into intensity. Rainn Wilson pops up, goes full John Wick on the rest of these bad guys. It's absolutely crazy. He's throwing the pipe bombs everywhere. He's shooting out his little disc thing. An absolutely bonkers pulp trauma horror style fight scene, but with that upped intensity of a modern film. I really do mean up in intensity, as the satire aspect of this is gone, and Rainn Wilson's character really becomes really believable as a superhero. Frank is a very convincing hero by the end of this movie, despite not being very convincing at all at the beginning. The confidence in his voice as he finishes off Kevin Bacon's character after not letting him talk his way out of this situation like he has all the previous ones. It's stunning. He sounds like Judge Dredd with the growl and delivery in his throat. After the fight, Frank ends up back with his wife, but only for a short period, as we get a weird, semi-realistic, in my opinion, ending where she ends up leaving, finding happiness with someone who can truly take care of her, which Frank can't do because he's so down about his own life at the moment. She ends up having kids, and you see him happy that his actions were able to bring her happiness, even if that wasn't with him and with someone else entirely. Overall, I think Super is definitely worth watching, as it's not at all comparable to Kick-Ass or any other superhero satire. I think it has a really unique happy ending, as well as some really crazy animated characters that you couldn't see in a normal non-pulpy movie just because of how ridiculous they can be. I think where this film suffers most is in the execution, with the first third, as I said, feeling kind of slow and shoddy, the second third feeling high intensity, and the third act feeling like a full-blown action movie. Acting, soundtrack, and even camera work and cinematography also got better in the second and third acts of the movie, so overall I do think it could have been a fantastic movie. But whether it was budget or just time constraints, something about it just feels like it's missing a little bit of what could have made it a classic rather than just a cult classic. If you're into superhero movies, absurdist comedy, or just interested in what James Gunn's done before, I think you'll definitely get something out of this movie, and honestly I think anyone that likes superhero movies will at least get a couple chuckles, though not as many as I think most people would realize. Despite the comedy and action tone and the comparisons to movies such as Kick-Ass that came out in a similar year, I think this movie is definitely a little more on the odd and indie side. When I watched it with Beverly, her first reaction wasn't necessarily a laugh, but more so a confusing look and why the heck I'm making her watch this. By the end of it, I think we can both admit that it was a weird, fun, and really crazy and foul-mouthed time.
I think tone-wise that this movie is really shoddy. I think quality-wise it's a little bit all over the place, but it is 11 years old and a little bit lower budget than some of the more recent films that James Gunn's been doing.
I'm gonna give Super a 7.8 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching, guys. As always, we'll see you next time. Ben and Bev, out.